At exactly 4 a.m. on August 16, 2025, something went down in Burkina Faso that had the whole region buzzing like a broken beehive. While most folks were still knocked out in their beds, the government launched a secret operation that would flip the script on everything people thought they knew about security in West Africa. The mission, personally supervised by President Ibrahim Traoré, wasn't your regular late-night patrol. It was a massive interception that snagged 57 full-sized trucks stuffed with military weapons and ammo. And not the kind you'd find lying around in some old armory. We're talking real firepower. The whole thing popped off near the Kenner region, right by the Togo border. That area is usually quiet at night, so quiet you can hear the wind dragging dust across the road. But that morning, border guards on routine patrol spotted what didn't make sense. A long convoy creeping through the darkness like it didn't want to be seen. No headlights, no radio chatter, just silence and steel rolling on back roads. Captain Mousakaber, the border commander, instantly felt something was off. He radioed it in before the trucks even covered another mile. Initial intel said these trucks were hauling humanitarian aid, but Kaber wasn't buying it. He basically said, "Come on now. Since when do aid convoys show up at 3 a.m. taking shady side routes? Who they think they fooling?" President Traoré didn't waste a heartbeat. He dialed up General Ibrahim Zirbo, the commander of Special Forces, and gave him a crystal clear order. Intercept the convoy. Be smart. This might be bigger than smuggling. That was all Zirbo needed. Within the hour, special units were airborne. Drones buzzed above, helicopters hovered low, and ground forces slipped into ambush positions like ghosts. By the time the convoy reached a narrow stretch of road, everything was locked in. At exactly 4 a.m., the trap closed. Roadblocks slammed into place. Lights flashed. Engines roared. Drivers tried to peel off, but there was nowhere to run. The special forces swept in with military precision, no Hollywood slow motion, no messy gunfights, just clean, fast, disciplined takedowns. When the first truck was opened, the entire team went silent. Inside, hidden under sacks labeled as agricultural support, were AK-47s, M16 rifles, grenade launchers, rockets, crates of ammunition, and military gear that could arm a small country. And every single truck was loaded the same way. Captain Kaber dialed the president immediately. "Mr. President, sir, you're not gonna believe this. These trucks are stacked with enough weapons to outfit an entire army." Traoré didn't panic. He didn't yell. He just said, "Secure everything. Don't lose a single round. And make those drivers talk. Someone's cooking up something real nasty, and we need to know who's behind the stove." The scale of the haul made one thing obvious. This wasn't some small-time trafficking gig. This was organized, expensive, strategic, and it had fingerprints nobody could see yet. Within hours, the investigation kicked off, and that's when the first domino fell. One of the drivers, Marc-Antoine Zongo, cracked. He swore he didn't know what was really inside the trucks. Said he was told they were moving machine parts to a warehouse in Togo before shipping overseas. But his trembling voice told investigators everything. They were pawns in a much bigger game. But who was playing that game? And why now? Because what investigators uncovered next didn't just raise eyebrows. It sent shockwaves all the way from Ouagadougou to Washington. As the sun started creeping up over the horizon, Burkina Faso's leadership was already knee-deep in what looked like the most complicated military smuggling case the country had ever seen. President Ibrahim Traoré gathered his top officials in an emergency briefing at the Presidential Command Center in Ouagadougou. Everybody in that room knew something huge was happening. This wasn't some random border bust. This was a full-blown geopolitical riddle. General Ibrahim Zirbo, still in full field gear, laid out the first report. "MR, President," he said, sliding photos across the polished table. "This haul isn't some small backyard operation. These weapons are military-grade, international-level stuff." The room went dead quiet. You could practically hear someone swallow. Traoré leaned forward, his eyes razor-sharp. Where exactly were these trucks headed? And who authorized them to pass through our borders at dawn without notifying the government? His tone wasn't angry, more like someone piecing together a puzzle and realizing the picture wasn't pretty. Intelligence teams had already run the truck registrations. That's when things got sketchy. The plates were legit, but the paperwork? Totally fake. The convoy was supposedly transporting industrial spare parts on behalf of a logistics company that didn't even exist. The whole operation was built on layers of deception thick enough to make an onion jealous. The real kicker came when they cracked open the digital trackers hidden inside 3 of the trucks. The GPS logs revealed a pattern. The convoy had made 2 previous runs earlier that month. Same route, same time window, same border zone. But nobody caught them. That meant one of 2 things. Either someone inside the system was asleep on the job, or someone was helping them. "General," Traoré said, "I want every border supervisor, every customs officer on that route questioned. No exceptions. If anyone's been sliding envelopes under the table, we're about to shut that down fast." Meanwhile, in the interrogation rooms, investigators were turning up more uncomfortable details. One driver admitted he'd been paid in cash, fresh bills, no trace. Another insisted he'd been hired through a middleman who always used private numbers and never met face to face. The drivers all had one thing in common. None of them actually knew who they were working for. But here's where the story really took a wild turn. When specialists examined the weapons, they found serial numbers scratched off, but not perfectly. Under laser analysis, faint markings suggested the weapons came from multiple international sources, including some that were supposedly restricted to foreign militaries. That meant whoever organized this shipment had serious money, serious reach, and seriously shady intentions. General Zirbo sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. This setup, it's not rebels. It's not random smugglers. This is something way more organized. Traoré nodded slowly. Someone out there thinks they can turn Burkina Faso into their playground. They think we won't notice. They think we won't push back. His voice tightened. They're wrong. If that wasn't enough, Signals intelligence picked up encrypted messages bouncing between Togo, Mali, and a private satellite channel. The timing matched the convoy movements perfectly. Somebody outside Burkina Faso was coordinating the whole thing like a chess game, moving pieces from country to country while staying invisible. But invisible isn't invincible, and Traoré wasn't backing down. He ordered a full sweep. Ports, airports, warehouses, private security companies, anywhere weapons could sneak through. The mission wasn't just about catching smugglers anymore. It was about finding the mastermind, because the mastermind was real and closer than anyone expected. What the investigators uncovered next didn't just expose a smuggling ring, it exposed a hidden alliance that could flip West Africa upside down. While investigators in Ouagadougou dug deeper into the seized weapons, a parallel intelligence unit was working behind the scenes, quiet, fast, and way under the radar. These weren't the usual uniformed officers. These were cyber analysts, signals experts, and undercover operatives who only showed up when the situation was serious enough to make the government tug on the Black Ops drawer. By noon, the team had finally cracked into the encrypted satellite messages that had been bouncing across borders. And what they found made everyone sit up straight. The messages weren't between local smugglers. They weren't even from West Africa. They were coming from a private military network operating out of Europe, a network known for supplying weapons to conflict zones that official governments weren't allowed to touch. These groups hide behind shell companies that look clean on paper but are dirtier than a busted oil filter underneath. The code name used in the intercepted messages? Project Nightshade. Yeah, when something has a name like that, you already know it's bad news. The messages laid out the whole game plan. Weapons entering Burkina Faso through the Togo corridor, then splitting off into Mali and Niger. The objective wasn't just to arm random groups, it was to destabilize the entire region. And someone was banking on chaos spreading like wildfire. President Traoré looked over the decrypted logs with a hard stare. So basically, he said, someone outside the continent is trying to light West Africa on fire and pretend their hands are clean. General Zirbo nodded. Yes, sir. And they're using Togo as the backdoor. The mention of Togo raised red flags immediately. For years, Burkina Faso had suspected that certain groups were using Togo's softer border checks to slip contraband into the Sahel. But nobody expected the scale to be this massive. This wasn't petty smuggling. This was an international pipeline. To make things worse, forensic teams examining the seized weapons discovered something even wilder. Some of the rifles were brand new, fresh off the production line, meaning they hadn't been in circulation long enough to be stolen or resold, meaning they were sold directly to someone with money and influence. Money wasn't the problem. Money is easy. Influence? That's where things get murky. One of the investigators, Lieutenant Joseph Sanga, slammed his file on the table. Look, sir, he said, there's no way this operation happens without at least one government official somewhere being in on it. These aren't amateur moves. Someone with connections signed off on this. Traoré wasn't surprised. People sell their souls for far less, he muttered. But things were about to get even messier. A new lead came in from an undercover asset in Lome, Togo. He reported that 3 days before the seizure, a European businessman had arrived quietly and checked into a private villa, not a hotel, not a resort, but a villa owned by a shell company with zero online footprint. the asset claimed the businessman wasn't alone. He had security with him, foreign security, and they carried equipment normally used by private military contractors. The president leaned back, exhaling slowly. So we've got foreign actors planning operations on African soil without permission, smuggling weapons through our borders, and trying to destabilize multiple countries at once. General Zirbo nodded grimly. Yes, Mr. President. And that businessman? He's still in Togo. Everyone in the room knew what that meant. Burkina Faso wasn't dealing with smugglers. They were dealing with a hidden international alliance using Africa as their chessboard. And Burkina Faso had just flipped the board. But the enemy wasn't going to sit quietly and accept that, because just 24 hours later, the mastermind made a move that shocked even the intelligence teams and proved that this operation was only the beginning. As the investigation pushed forward, officials in Burkina Faso realized they were staring at something way bigger than they expected. What looked like a routine arms smuggling bust suddenly felt like peeling back layers of a giant onion, each layer revealing something messier, more connected, and seriously unsettling. Local intelligence officers, already stretched thin, began cross-checking serial numbers from the seized weapons. What they found made a few people in the room drop their coffee. Several of the weapons traced back to registered shipments from Europe, shipments that were supposedly lost during transit months earlier. That wasn't even the wildest part. A different batch appeared in databases associated with equipment routed for humanitarian missions. How does a rifle meant for peacekeeping units end up in the hands of rogue groups in a landlocked African nation? Someone, somewhere, had been playing a very dirty game. Burkina Faso's military spokesperson went public, revealing bits and pieces to maintain transparency while protecting sensitive intel. The statement created a shockwave across West Africa. Other nations started calling Ouagadougou, wanting to know if any clues pointed toward a larger regional arms pipeline. West African leaders were obviously worried. Nobody wants to wake up one day and realize their borders have become a superhighway for illegal firepower. Inside Burkina Faso, the people felt a strange mix of fear and pride. Fear, because the discovery confirmed suspicions many had whispered about for years, that hidden hands were fueling instability behind the scenes. Pride, because their country had just pulled off one of the biggest seizures in recent history, proving to the world that they weren't just a passive player, they were stepping up. The military launched a new series of operations, this time targeting routes believed to be used by intermediary agents. It wasn't glamorous work. Soldiers patrolled rugged terrain, dusty border points, and abandoned roads where smugglers usually moved under the cover of darkness. Some nights were quiet. Others involved tense chases where engines roared through the desert and headlights flicked across the emptiness like sparks. Meanwhile, investigators continued digging through communication logs from devices found at the scene. Several messages referenced coded drop-off points, shadowy brokers, and a mysterious figure whose name popped up more than once. Someone known only by a nickname, Le Renard, the Fox. If that wasn't ominous, I don't know what is. As more pieces fell into place, one thing became obvious. This wasn't some low-tier smuggling hustle. This was a multi-country, well-financed operation designed to keep weapons circulating where conflict was profitable. Burkina Faso unintentionally threatened the entire dark market network by intercepting the shipment. And as word spread, eyes from across the globe started turning toward the incident. Some foreign observers began floating theories. NGOs hinted that private security contractors could be involved. Independent journalists suggested that political actors, possibly even from outside Africa, might be bankrolling the chaos for economic advantage. Nobody had definitive proof. Yet, But the timing, the scale, and the complexity of the seizure were raising eyebrows everywhere. Inside military headquarters, analysts laid maps across tables, marking entries and exits, known transit points, and suspicious enclaves near border towns. They weren't just reacting anymore. They were gearing up for the next move. One high-ranking officer reportedly said, "If someone thought they could slip this past us, they picked the wrong country to mess with." That line quickly spread among citizens, becoming a symbol of rising national confidence. But here's the real kicker. Just when investigators thought they had a grip on the situation, a chilling new clue emerged. A single encrypted file, partially recovered from a damaged phone, contained coordinates that didn't match any known smuggling route. And the location it pointed to left everyone in the room stunned. Because what those coordinates revealed next? Oh, you're gonna want to buckle up for that part. Those mysterious coordinates weren't pointing to a border crossing, a smuggler hideout, or a weapons depot. Nope. They led straight to a deserted stretch of land near a mining zone, an area supposedly under strict monitoring. The place was quiet, dusty, and looked like nothing more than an empty patch of earth to anyone driving past. But intelligence teams knew better. When they overlaid satellite images from different months, the truth snapped into focus like a camera coming alive. There had been movement, heavy machinery, temporary structures, and what looked like loading platforms. Someone had scrubbed the site clean right before the seizure happened. They didn't leave a trace, not even a footprint or a broken crate. Whoever operated there wasn't sloppy. They were professionals. The kind who didn't panic when things went sideways. The kind who had backup plans, escape routes, and probably a lot of money behind them. As soon as the military arrived on site, the energy shifted. Even the air felt off, like the land was holding secrets it didn't want to give up. Soldiers scanned every corner with detection equipment, while investigators combed the ground for microscopic clues. After hours of searching, one officer waved the team over. Buried under the surface, they found pieces of plastic, tiny metal fragments, and traces of fuel that didn't match anything used by local machines. This wasn't just a hiding spot. This was a logistics hub, one that had been scrubbed with expert-level precision. Back at headquarters, the discovery sparked a fiery debate. Why would a weapons network hide operations next to a mining zone? Was it a coincidence? Or were minerals somehow part of the bigger game? Burkina Faso's resource-rich land has always been a magnet for global interests. Some officials argued that certain foreign actors might have been using mining shipments as cover to smuggle weapons. Others thought the arms route was being protected by local collaborators who had access to restricted zones. The President's Security Council demanded answers fast. They requested updated satellite passes, international support, and expanded cyber investigations. Across the ocean, intelligence agencies quietly reached out, offering partnership assistance, which is diplomatic code for, "We want to know everything you know." Burkina Faso accepted help, but very cautiously. They weren't about to hand over their entire playbook. Then came another twist. Intercepted communications from earlier in the month mentioned the rotation cycle. At first, analysts assumed it referred to smuggling schedules. But after revisiting the data, they realized the phrase lined up with patterns in mining transport convoys. That was the moment many officials felt their stomachs drop. If weapons were being cycled through mineral exports, then the network wasn't just sneaking guns into the country. They were using Burkina Faso's natural resources as a global cloak. It was a whole different level of corruption and danger. The investigation suddenly evolved from a local victory into an international storm. News outlets picked up pieces of the story, analysts on talk shows tried to make sense of the details, and social media exploded with theories. Some people blamed foreign mining corporations, others blamed shadow governments, while a few claimed mercenary groups were behind it. No matter the speculation, one thing was clear: the world was now watching. Meanwhile, on the ground, tension rose. Military patrols increased around critical areas, checkpoints tightened, and intelligence units were put on high alert. Everyone sensed that the next clue, whatever it was, would shake the case wide open. And they were right. Because just when investigators thought things couldn't get any deeper, they recovered a contact list from a hidden folder on one of the seized devices. And one name on that list? Yeah, it sent shockwaves through the entire chain of command. Because the identity tied to that contact? Man, you're not ready for what comes next. The name on that list wasn't just any name. It was someone high up, someone with influence that stretched beyond Burkina Faso, someone who could shake governments and make deals from behind velvet curtains. The team stared at the screen, jaws practically hitting the floor. Every eye in the room knew this was bigger than a smuggling operation. This was the puppet master, the one pulling strings behind the whole nightmare. President Traoré wasted no time. Within hours, he called for a national emergency briefing broadcast live to the country. Cameras rolled, reporters shuffled papers, and millions tuned in, already sensing that history was about to be made. Behind him were the confiscated weapons stacked like a grim monument to what could have been. He didn't need to hype it up. The sheer sight of rifles, rockets, and grenades was enough to leave viewers shaking their heads. Fellow Burkinabé, Traoré began, voice calm but commanding. 3 days ago, we intercepted the largest weapons smuggling operation in our nation's history. What we found wasn't just illegal arms. It was a plan to destabilize our country, to turn us against each other, and to install a government that answers to foreign powers, not to our people. He held up a folder stuffed with documents, photos, and digital evidence. Here is the proof. 57 trucks, over $700 million worth of weapons, and a network that stretches across continents. But thanks to our alert forces, we stopped it. And now, the people of Burkina Faso and all of Africa can see the truth. The crowd watching online erupted. People in squares, markets, and homes erupted into applause. Young folks shouted, "Traoré! Traoré!" Women waved hands in victory. Elders nodded tearfully. The president's message was clear. Unity and vigilance had saved the nation. Then came the boldest move. Traoré announced that the confiscated weapons would be transformed into tools for life. Rifles and rockets would be melted down and repurposed to build schools, hospitals, and irrigation systems. The first piece of metal poured, a school bell, ringing a new era of peace. Every morning when our children hear this bell, Traoré said, they will hear the sound of freedom. Across the globe, the story made headlines. International media called it historic. UN observers praised the transformation, and the African Union declared it a model for turning tools of destruction into symbols of hope. Meanwhile, back in court, the suspects, former officials, businessmen, and foreign operatives, faced charges ranging from treason to weapons trafficking. Confessions poured in. The evidence? Irrefutable. Audio recordings, bank transactions, surveillance footage. Even the defense attorneys struggled to respond. Some foreign governments demanded the release of their nationals, but Traoré didn't flinch. A diplomatic passport doesn't grant you immunity to commit crimes on our soil, he said firmly. By the end of the operation, Burkina Faso had not only stopped an imminent threat, but also sent a powerful message to the world. Africa would no longer be a playground for foreign agendas. Traoré's leadership and the unity of the people had turned fear into triumph. The final lesson? Courage, vigilance, and unity can rewrite history. From seized weapons to school bells, from chaos to hope, Burkina Faso had transformed a potential disaster into a symbol of continental awakening. Every year, this day would be remembered as National Awakening and Victory Day, teaching generations that freedom and self-determination can never be bought or stolen. President Traoré ended with words that will echo through history. Africa writes its own story now. We defend ourselves, we shape our future, and when we stand together, we are unstoppable. Not by guns, not by bribes, not by lies. Africa is awake, and we will never be silenced again. The nation erupted in cheers. Across the streets, schools, and villages, people embraced, celebrated, and felt a surge of pride. Burkina Faso had not just survived a conspiracy, it had set set a precedent for all of Africa. And as the sun set on that historic day, the people knew this was only the beginning of a new era, one where unity, courage, and hope beat